Hello chess friends and welcome to Zarov's Chess channel and welcome to the TCEC Season 19 Premier Division. So we have covered now many games played by Stockfish. It's time for a Leela C0 game and I've made a bad choice. I've predicted that Stockfish will win this TCEC Season 19. I'm not going to predict anything anymore because in this game that I wanted to show you played by Leela C0, I'm not sure anymore, so I will not predict anything till the end of this TCEC Season 19. It's best to that way because I'm not sure. As I said, both of these engines are playing really the most brutal chess that can be played, and that's why we should simply enjoy, not predict anything, not really be sentimental about these engines. Just watch, enjoy. So let's check out now the game. It was Leela C0 here with the white pieces against another top engine, Scorpio. Incredible performance with the so-called 150 attack against the King's Indian, sort of East Indian setups. It also was important for me to see because I'm doing most of the times also this 150 setup, sort of. I will explain you, of course, what's all about and what are the strategical ideas. So let's check out now the game. It was round 1 and, of course, fight. So d4 played by Leela C0. We have g6 by Scorpio. Modern defense setup, e4, bishop to g7, and now knight to c3, which is also my recommendation to continue here because in some occasions you can transpose into f4 line. Still, this is of course prearranged. So far in the game we have c6, here knight to f3. Now comes this 150 attack setup. So I play also knight to f3, knight to c3, d4, e4, bishop to e3, queen to d2, bishop to d3 is our setup. So we're waiting basically what black is going to do. In the game d6 was played and now bishop to e3, knight to d7. This gives black the opportunity to have a very nice control of the e5 square. Black can simplify sometimes the position with e5 move and really get the position in the center static and compact. So that's why knight to d7, very important move. Here bishop to d3. This bishop to d3 idea is a very important one because if you try really to go aggressively into the game with queen to d2, queenside castling, there is always this problem after b5. It seems to me always that black is a little bit faster, so black can stay also a little bit further with the king in the center. Let's see a possible continuation after queen to d2, maybe knight to f6, and we now try really our 150 attack. Then b5 in some occasions could be really a problem for white. You would be forced to play maybe something like a3 or maybe even e5 immediately, but it's not so easy, as I said, to make progress here from white's perspective. The problem about bishop to d3 and now b5, a potential b5 here by black, then you can castle kingside. And now after knight to f6, the main goal of white here is after potential a4 and b4, you see you have knight to e2. Still you can maneuver your knight on a very active square g3, but at least you have protected your e4 pawn. And now we have the pawn central control as white. Still this is an equal position. You're not going to win the game because you have this setup, but I mentioned that because here bishop to d3 very important because black's idea is, as I said, to make progress simply with the move b5. So after move bishop to d3, here the game was still prearranged to the move knight to f6. We have castling and now castling. Now it was time for the engines to calculate for themselves. Here in the game, queen to d2 was played by Leela C0. So the idea is, of course, in some occasions to play the move bishop to h6 and trade off the dark square bishops. Because, first of all, the dark square bishop is the most important piece in black setup. It has, of course, a very important attacking role, sort of, but it has also a very important defensive role. It protects the king. It's not so common now because the kings are on the same side. In some occasions, we have played always this ideas h4, h5, this bishop to h6, trade off the bishops and delivering checkmate through the h5. But it's not so easy anymore. The kings are on the same side. Now the position is much more positional, not such a tactical position. Now it's really trying to see pawn breakthroughs in the center. So e5 is the main goal of white. After the move queen to d2, we have still this move b5, and we see now we have h3. The idea behind this move is, of course, to prevent knight to g4 attacking the bishop. So here in the game, bishop to b7, and now e5 here immediately played by Leela C0. This surprised me a little bit because in some occasions you see really this move a4. Then after b4, knight to e2, and still with knight to g3, we could have good protection of our e4 pawn. But Here e5, very aggressive move by Leela c0, knight to e8, and here we have e takes d6, knight to d6, and it seems to me that Scorpio has defended very well here, because first of all, this knight on d6 is a very nice piece. It controls the center. It has also a very nice defensive function. Still, as I said, we cannot attack the king immediately. It's not so easy. The kings are on the both sides, so on the same side. So here, pushing pawns is not an option. Here in the game, rook to e1, played by Leela c0. First of all, this is this principle of the last piece that hasn't played so far. So the last active piece we should really bring into the game. Getting the rook, of course, on the natural square, on the semi-open file, on the e file. Very nice move so far. And here we have a6. The idea behind this move of blacks is simply now to get this b5 protected, and now our main goal is a c5 pawn breakthrough. So that's why here Leela c0 reacts immediately. It's not allowing this c5 idea. If c5, then we can simply take the pawn, and black will lose some material. So that's why rook to e8. Here Scorpio competes, of course, on the e file, and we have now knight to e4. And it seemed to me that maybe knight to f5 is a very interesting idea, but then you get a very tricky idea, which Leela c0 has prepared here, bishop to g5. After knight to d4, you cannot take the pawn. You get here knight takes d4, bishop to d4, and now knight to d6. This is a serious tactic that Leela c0 has prepared here. So it's not so easy for black also to go after the pawn on d4. So after the move knight to e4, knight takes e4 was played, and here bishop takes e4. So now you see this bishop is creating sort of a positional pin here on the bishop on b7. C takes b5 is maybe a threat. You see, you cannot recapture with this, a takes b5, pardon me, c takes b5 is not a possibility. Your bishop on b7 is hanging. Knight to b6 was played in the, here comes really the move that surprised me a little bit, because it seems to me, okay, maybe a5, you're good, maybe even b3 to protect everything. But here Leela c0, from this point on, Leela plays really a perfect attack. Bishop to h6, leaving simply the pawn on a4 hanging. What to do now from black's perspective? Black takes, knight takes a4, we have bishop takes g7, king to g7, and now knight to e5. Now this knight comes on a very active square, very nice centralized knight, and the problem is now, first of all, the c6 pawn is hanging, but also there are now finally this dark square weaknesses which we have provoked after trades of bishops. The knight is out of game, a little bit far away from the action. Okay, the knight took a pawn, but it's really too deflected from the defense of the king. The bishop is stuck simply to the defense of the c6 pawn. So far, Leela c0 has prepared now really a great attack. Rook to a3, rook to g3 is a possibility. Rook to e3, rook to g3. Still maybe knight to g4, queen to h6. So now Leela c0 is using all of the dark square weaknesses that black has here in the position. Knight takes b2. So Scorpio grabs another pawn, but Leela doesn't care really for pawns anymore. Now rook to b1, attacking the knight. Knight to c4 is of course not an option. Knight takes c4, b takes c4. The bishop is hanging, so there's also this tension on the b file. Knight to a4. And what Leela c0 has gained here now, that both minor pieces of blacks are out of game. The knight, as I said, the bishop is out of game, and now it's time to attack. c4, great move. Again, forcing really to break this pawn chain. Again, there is this tension here on the light squares. We have queen to d6. Scorpio is trying really desperately now to bring another defender into the game. Here we have knight to g4, and now king to g8. Very important move, because there was this threat to go with the queen here on h6. We have knight to h6, king to g7, and now rook to b3. That was our main goal. Rook to g3, and also knight to f5 could be a dangerous tactic. The fork, the royal fork on the queen and the rook, because there is this tension on the g file. Rook to f8 was played. If we try something like knight to c5, then we can still play rook to f3. After knight to e4, you see the f7 pawn is hanging. That's the main problem. After something like king to h8, we can still take the knight, and you see the c5 idea is simply too slow. We can play simply d5. Still, this bishop is blocked out. Now it's really time to attack the dark squares. Serious threat is queen to c3. So this wasn't played in the game, but I wanted to show you here after b takes c4, queen to c3. is game over. So you can checkmate. So you see, this rook lifts. These rook lifts are always fascinating me in these top engine games. Leela C0, Stockfish, Komodo, all of them, they're using the rooks very actively in the game. That's, I think, the huge difference between human chess and the engine chess. The rooks attacks are the most monstrous attacks now in chess these days. Rook to b3, rook to f8, and see now again the knight comes very active into the game. Here king to h8, and now rook to g3. Ooh, this is something really hard to defend now. What to do? As I said, both of your minor pieces are all of game. Knight to c5 here, you cannot take the knight, of course, but bishop to b1 solves now the problems. You don't have good attacking possibilities. In the game, knight to e6 was played, but now knight to e5. Again, a great tactic that Leela C0 has prepared here. If you take queen to d4, then it's game over. We have simply queen to h6. If you try queen to f4, maybe to trade off the queens, then rook to g6. That's the main goal here. After maybe f takes g6, you see knight takes g6 is the serious threat. You lose the queen. If you trade off the queens, queen to h6, rook takes h6. Again, you see your h7 pawn is hanging. So there are too many targets here simply in black position. Rook to e4, rook to h4 is again also another threat. Knight to f7 is also possible. If you try f5, then you get knight to g6, and similar idea with fork would simply take the rook. If you play king to g7, take the rook, then we can take out the knight. So simply too many tactics that black has to protect here. So that's why after the move knight to e5, Scorpio didn't take the pawn on d4. That was line that I was analyzing. I wanted to see what happens if you take the pawn here in the game, king to g7. But now this other rook comes into the game, rook to e4. We have knight takes d4. Desperate try here now by black to defend, because again the serious threat is rook to h4, queen to h6, and queen to h7 checkmate. So here Scorpio tries to sacrifice the piece in order to simplify the position somehow, maybe getting this 3 pawns rolling somehow, because there is this pawn majority on the queen side, 3 versus 1, but it's too late. Queen to d4, queen takes, rook takes d4, rook to d8, and now simply competing on the d file is very important. Now we have rook takes d4, and now a5. But again, it's simply too slow, because here Leela C0 plays a great motif, c5, blocking out the bishop. Very important to not allow this bishop to come into the game. We have f6, but now rook to d7, very important. Here Scorpio takes, f takes e5, but now rook takes e7 first. We're grabbing the bishop, and now a4. But this is protectable, because here rook to b6 first, played by Leela C0. We have king to e6, but now very important move, bishop to a2. You see this pawn and now the bishop are not allowing this king to come into the game. If this king comes maybe here to c4, maybe c3, b3, and these two connected pass pawns, then it could be a problem here for white. But now with bishop to a2, the game is really over. King to d7, we have rook to b7, grabbing another pawn here, 7, b4. Now simple trades of rooks, and now comes a very important bishop to c4. Never allow this pawns to roll, because now again we have a similar setup. Again, the king cannot come into the game. The b6 cut off, the a6 square is also cut off. Here b3 was played by Scorpio, but now h4, king to b7, and now g4. Here the game was prolonged, but it's basically game over. Whatever you do, let's see a possible king to c7 will simply push the pawn further, and you cannot catch up with this pawn. So as I said, the game was prolonged for a little bit further, but this was now a completely winning endgame here for c0. If you try a3, of course, we'll simply take this pawn, bishop to b3, and covering the a2. We can create this distant pass pawn that uncatchable for black's king, and it was game over. So again, great attack by Leela C0. So now Leela C0 has equalized with Stockfish. Still, Stockfish has one game to play. Can catch up with Leela C0. Can also take the lead if Stockfish wins now the next game. This is really great chess so far. Probably, I'm not going to predict anything, as I said, but probably Leela C0 and Stockfish will meet in the finals again, and then we'll have again this brutal 100 match game in the two top engines, and I'm really looking forward to watch that. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Showed me some great ideas about the Spurs modern defense setup, how to continue here. This E5 pawn breakthrough in the beginning was very important. Okay, great attack by Leela C0. If you want to see more brutal games like this, check out my commented chess games play by computer series. Here's the link. And if you want to see humans battling in their best chess games, check out my best chess game time series. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best of